What do you do when you have a part that's bigger than your laser's cutting capacity? So if you've ever wanted to cut something that is larger than your laser's cut capacity, either for yourself or to sell, I'm going to show you how in this video. And I'll also tell you how to get a free copy of my quick reference guide for doing this process. So stick around. So as you can see, this board is actually sticking out the front of my laser. So this is on my longer B1 30 watt laser, which has a 450 by 440 cutting area in millimeters. And I need to cut something that is 600 millimeters long. So let's get to cutting this thing. First though, let's go take a look at how I set this up in Lightburn. So this is the part that I'm going to cut out. If you're wondering, this is a pendulum for a wooden clock. I know it doesn't look like a pendulum, but trust me, it is. I'll have a video on that in the future. And as you can see, it is much bigger than my cutting area. So the pendulum is like 600 millimeters and my cutting area is 450. So we need to do two things. One, we need to cut this part in two and make two files out of it. And second, we need to set it up so that we can cut those parts and have them line up perfectly on the laser. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to drag this down, and I've got this, I'm just using the red layer here so it stands out more. The layer color makes no difference. This is just what I'm using for the video. I want to do the large part first at the top and line it up because this is closer to the width of my board than the bottom is. And if something happens and my board's a little crooked, I've got more material to play with on the bottom. So we're going to use the top first. All right, so let me zoomed in here a little bit so it's easier to see. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the T1 or tool layer. I may call it frame at some point in the video because I use it mainly for framing. So if I do, I apologize. It's the tool layer. And I'm going to make a square with it. I want to get it fairly close to the top. That should be good enough. Go back to my select tool. So I'm going to first click on my outline here or my shape, and I'm going to hold down the shift key and I'm going to click my tool layer. And then I'm going to go to tools, cut shapes. And now you'll see the top is no longer selected, but the bottom is. So basically what has happened now is I have two parts, and you see if I move it apart, it is now two parts. So then the next thing I want to do is I've got the split in two. I want to add crosshairs for this because we're going to need that when we get to the actual cutting step. So I'm going to go over here to circle and I'm going to make that blue because we will actually need to engrave these. I'm going to hold down the shift key and I'm going to drag out a circle. I'm going to go up here. I'm going to make that like 10 mil by 10 and let me zoom in on that so you can see what I'm doing. So now I've got my circle. I'm going to click on the pencil tool. I'm going to come over to the circle and you'll see as I get to the four corners, to sort of the four quadrants of the circle, it'll change to a little crosshair. So anywhere else, it's a little squiggly line. When I get near the sort of the center or the half of the circle, whatever you want to call it, it changed to a crosshair. So I'm going to click there and that will automatically put the line in the center of that half of the circle. I can hold down the shift to drag a straight line, come down here to the bottom when I get my second crosshair, click, left click. I'm going to right click to get rid of the line. Come over here and do the same thing for the horizontal. I'm going to left click, hold shift and drag till I get the same cursor icon, right click and go back to my go back to my selection tool. So now I've got my crosshair. I'm going to right click and group this. So I've got that one. Try and get it as close to the cut line as possible. Yeah, that's good enough. Doesn't have to be perfect, just close. So now I'm going to do Control C, Control V, paste that. I'm going to line this one up. Let me zoom back in so you can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to line this one up with my first circle. And then I'm just going to use my arrow keys to move across to the other side. That's pretty good. That looks good there. Okay, so now I've got my crosshairs. I've got my shape cut in two. I'm going to delete the bottom. And now I'm going to go File, Save As. And I'm going to call this Pendulum Bottom. I know it may not make sense because this looks like the top, but this is actually going to be the bottom. It really doesn't matter. You're not going to name your file the same as mine. So just name it, you would name it something that makes sense to you. I'm going to come back in. I'm going to do Control Z to bring the bottom back. I'm going to delete the top half of this. I'm going to select everything. I'm going to move this up. I'm going to zoom back in so you can see. So I've still got my two crosshairs here. I've got my engraving or my cut line for the bottom half of the cut I'm going to do. And I'm going to do Save As again. And I'm going to call this one Pendulum Top. Okay, so now I've got my two files. They're separate. I've got my crosshairs. Now we can go down to the shop and get this loaded up in Lightburn with the laser. Here is the bottom of my pendulum that I have already designed. I brought this in a Lightburn. I'm now down in the shop by my laser. I have everything set up and ready to go. Now I'm using 1/2 inch or 12.7 millimeter sand ply from the big box store. And this is my cut layer. I'm not actually cutting in one pass at 2000. I'm actually running 29 passes, and that might seem a little ridiculous, but in my testing, I found that is the best way to get a decent cut all the way through and not burn the bottom too much. All right, so I'm going to turn on the laser. So I apologize for the audio quality because the audio is going to get wrecked by the laser. Also, I want to point out, I have defocused my laser. I've got this really close to the top of the material because if you're doing thicker material and you're cutting, you want to be closer to the material. I'm going to frame it out now. And again, that's the purpose of this orange tool path here, is to help me frame this out. So the first cut and engrave, we are not using print and cut because we need to get these little crosshairs engraved onto our piece so that we can line it up and use print and cut on the second cut. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to frame this out. Everything looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and get this started. So I'm going to close up my enclosure here, kick on the extractor fan and air assist, and we're going to run this bad boy. Now the cut is done, I'm going to move the board. So now you can see I've got my pendulum top here, and here are my two crosshairs. So the first thing I want to do is I want to put my laser onto the crosshair back here. So you can see down here, there is a crosshair, and that's going to be our first mark for print and cut. So I'm going to go ahead and move the laser. And I'm just going to use this piece of black acrylic to get rid of the glare. And I'm going to use my flashlight here to help me see. I'm going to go ahead and fire the laser so I can see the spot. I'm going to get it dialed in on this crosshair. So if we come in here, you should be able to see the laser is dead center of the crosshairs. I'm back over here to Lightburn. I'm going to select the first crosshair, and I'm going to click the print and cut icon, which is just a little printer with the scissors next to it. And we are going to click set first target because I've already selected the target and I already have the target lined up on the laser. So we'll select the first target. Now we're going to click on the second crosshair, and that's going to be our second target. And I'm going to say jog to selection. And the laser is going to move over to about where it thinks it should be. So now I'm going to use the Lightburn controls. And you have to do all these from Lightburn. You cannot manually move the laser head because the laser and Lightburn needs to know exactly where the module is for this to work. And now we've got the second one lined up. You see the laser is on the spot on the crosshair for the second one. We click set second target position. Now on this one, there is no scaling. I've lined everything up. I should not need to scale, and I don't want to scale because I want this to be the original size. So I'm going to click align outputs, no scaling. And now if I open up my preview, so this looks like it's a little bit shifted to the right. And that's because this board is not exactly square to the laser, but because Lightburn knows where those spots are and we have lined the laser head up, now Lightburn can adjust the engraving so that it matches up. So now all that's set and ready to go. So the engrave layer, I just left those on so we can see the crosshairs. I'm not outputting those. We're going to go ahead and close up the enclosure. Let's flip on our extractor fan and away we go. If you're already a member of my newsletter, you will get the free file I mentioned earlier in the video automatically to your email sometime within the next 24 hours. Depends on how slow the servers are being. If you're not signed up for my newsletter and you want to get a copy of the file, check out the link in the description. And it's done. All right. Well, first piece, couple pieces came out no problem. Let's get this out of here. And this is the backside. Look at this beautiful cut on the backside too. Like hardly any burning. Let's separate these. Look at that. Oh my goodness. Beautiful. That turned out better than I expected, quite honestly. And here's my finished pendulum. It came out great. I'm super happy with it. And if you'd like to see another video about print and cut, you can check it out up here. Thanks for watching.